Hello everybody, Dokkan Assets here. Today we are back with another Dokkan Battle animation analysis video, and in the spirit of the Dragon Ball Heroes units dropping very soon on Dokkan, of course, this year being the Limit Breaker Super Saiyan 4 Vegito and Super Saiyan 3 Rose, I figured it is a good time to go back and take a look at some of these older Super Dragon Ball Heroes super attacks. Obviously, last year we took a look at Hearts, and along with him, we actually took a look at the Super Saiyan 4 Vegito batch of units, but I've never actually taken a look at Trunks' batch of units. So in today's video, we are going to be taking a look at Trunks', and then later on this weekend, if you're watching this video as it goes up, we're then going to do the Awakenings as their own video, because I mean, this is like a lot to do in one video. So, with that being said, right, I am actually pretty excited to take a look at these. One thing to keep in mind before we get into this is that these super attacks are quite old. They say 1 year ago, but that's actually 2 years ago now. 2021 is when both of these sets of supers are from. So that is something important to keep in mind, that obviously that was when these released. And, as per usual, let's watch through them one time first, and then we will go ahead. Hello to Rami. You should go watch that, by the way. I'm the editor for that channel. Anyhow, so the other interesting thing to note about these SDBH super attacks, right, and is the reason why I feel like the Hearts one was almost so good is because they did something more original with it. With all of these SAs, they are based off of the actual super attacks from the Super Dragon Ball Heroes arcade game, right? Which I don't think is a bad thing by any means, and it's obviously cool then if you play the arcade game, seeing that kind of animation get translated into Dokkan. But I feel like sometimes when it comes to the Dokkan SAs, it kind of leads it to then, you know, looking sometimes kind of lackluster. It depends on the unit. And another very interesting thing to note, I feel like, with these animations, is the lack of backgrounds. Ironically enough, Trunks actually has one, even though it's very minimalistic. But obviously, by this point in Dokkan history, right, a lot of these super attack animations have more proper backgrounds, right, where it kind of takes you to the scene of the anime, right, rather than just being an attack in some random location. And I suppose, funny enough, Putin's kind of does that, and I guess Supreme Kai's does, but it looks more just like a generic wasteland, right, even with pans, right. If we look at Mei Cabra's as well, it's just like, I guess that is the same as Trunks's, it's the Demon Realm, but it feels kind of generic, right? I feel like the backgrounds definitely contribute to making these almost feel a little bit older, because now a lot of the time, and again, even during this time of these super attacks, right, they would kind of transport you to the scene rather than the character being in some random location. So I'm sure that that kind of doesn't help the emptiness feeling of some of these supers. But let's go ahead and get into it. By the way, don't forget to like and subscribe if you guys are enjoying the video. I always love doing these animation analysis videos, and SDBH is my favorite celebration of the year, so of course your boy had to do a couple of extra videos for it. By the way, before we do get started with this, I was talking about obviously how they take these from the game. I did actually make a tweet seeing if anybody could find it. I know for a fact in the past I saw some kind of big thread or video or something comparing like every single SDBH attack to the ones that we had in game. I wish I had that for you in this video, but I don't, unfortunately. So if you can find that, let me know in the description, and in the comment section, and I'll throw it down as like a pinned comment or something like that. Regardless though, with all that being said, let's go ahead and get into the video. So obviously, starting us off, we have Putin with a nice little animation of her hitting the stick? I'm not really sure what this is actually. Her wand, maybe? Because obviously, like, they have magic and whatever. I do like the little electricity effect that kind of pulsates on it. That's pretty cool. It's a nice little animation, right? It's nothing too crazy. But funny enough, I will say, this kind of goes along with my whole thing of, you know, Dokkan almost loves to do these, like, semi-intro animation super attacks where they kind of have, like, an intro in the super attack, but it's not actually an intro animation. It's kind of interesting. But I think that one might be happenstance, since obviously these are based off of the SDBH animations themselves. After her card art plays on the screen, we then have a pretty cool transition, obviously from the shot that she was in before, to her moving a little bit. And that is one thing I do really appreciate about these, even though they do kind of look a little bit older in terms of being like sort of empty on the screen. The movement on most of these is pretty good, right? They have the little bit of minimal movement. It's not just one PNG to another, right? You actually see her lift up the staff. And I feel like changing it here makes enough sense because obviously it's supposed to be like she's whipping it forward, right? Which maybe they could have added one more frame in between or kind of blurred it, but I think it looks fine. And then obviously we have her bringing the wand up, right, with a little bit of electricity effect. And this is a pretty cool transition here, right? Obviously bringing from the side of the screen to then right in your face, and you don't really notice it, but obviously here in the background you can see that Putin's face transitions from here to here, right, in terms of what asset is showing. So that's a pretty cool way to kind of distract the viewer a little bit. And not to mention, they probably didn't even have to include that because you can't even really tell it's there, right? You're just like so blindsided by this, but it's not even there. But it's cool they include anyway. And I love the energy effect, by the way. This is so dynamic with all these little like lines kind of looking like spaghetti, you know, shooting off. It looks really cool. And then of course her bringing it around back, right? This looks pretty cool because it kind of passes by the camera and is then behind her head, right? With again a little bit of movement of her kind of winding it up from the back. Then before she obviously launches it forward, which looks pretty clean, and of course then firing the blast of the enemy, which is a really good blast effect. I love the, like, you know, between the two balls of energy, the little like beam that kind of connects them. That looks really good, right? It almost kind of looks like a special beam cannon, but you know, it's supposed to be like this beam of magic energy, so looks really good. And then obviously we have this little explosion at the end, which is cool that, you know, she kind of goes off screen, and then you have this kind of pinkish purple explosion here. Again, I don't think that this animation is bad by any means. It's just really simple, right? And I think it's effective enough, right? It works just fine, but I would love to see them do more, I think is kind of my point with looking at these. And especially this one. Kenoa definitely makes me feel that way a lot because unfortunately her animation is extremely simple. You basically have, right, the one PNG of Kenoa right there, right? And then bam, you have her arm lifting up, which they do move it a little bit. Yeah, because the red on her eye, you can see the red on this eye gets a little bit less as it kind of pans up. And then of course she brings her arm up, which is basically her just saluting, I guess, right? And then of course bringing it to the energy ball, which I will say the energy blast looks amazing here. They did such a good job with this, and I do like they add the little thing of her blinking there. But this is really, really nice in terms of the energy, because obviously it's something super unique, and this is definitely a very Dragon Ball Heroes-esque energy attack, right? There ain't nothing like this in the anime, really. But obviously it is basically her just sitting in the sky, right, with the static PNG, before it then transitions into her card art. And then of course, again, it's basically just her with the ball in the sky. Again, the electricity effects look amazing though. And then, of course, she basically just brings her arm down, which the arm animation is pretty fluid there, which is pretty cool, right? You can see it's a very nice little swoop. But it's just very basic, right? I remember when these came out, right, kind of being disappointed by these. Because obviously, you know, there was much better animations at the time. This felt like a unit from a couple years before this would have come out, right? This is a 2021 SA, so there were still some fantastic SAs by this point, you know, in Dokkan animation history. Either way, though, moving on to Pan here, right? Her animation is super simple. I do like this little bit of animation in the beginning with her kind of bringing her finger forward to point, right? That's very fluid, very smooth. It definitely looks pretty good. And then, of course, we have the cut to behind her where she then moves forward to punch the enemy, right? I do like, again, they have this nice little bit of minimal movement here. Let me get tabbed to it. There you go, where she's kind of twisting back, but then you can see her actual arm is pulling back a little bit, right? Which is a nice little added detail before she then flies forward and then bonks into the enemy. Again, it's a very simple animation, and I feel like by this point, maybe it could have been a little bit more high quality, but not only is it like, you know, the Super Dragon Ball Heroes units aren't getting the treatment that these big boy units are, of course, you know, they're taking, you know, references from the, you know, actual game. So By the way, after this, one of the funniest things play, I'm pretty sure it's a super, yeah. You have Pan beating down on the enemy, and I love the little stars. I always found this so funny. This has always been one of my favorite essays, just because the stars is such like a goofy effect to have in here, but it looks pretty good. It's very funny, and the actual like animation of Pan kind of beating up the enemy looks pretty good too. I will say this cut is a little bit weird here, going from her kind of beating down on the enemy like this, and then it immediately goes to like her about to wind up for a kick. That's kind of why they have like the asset move back a little bit, but then it's supposed to be like, I think it's just transitioning from the front to looking at the back, but it does kind of feel a little bit jarring, I will say, even though it is following the same movement at least, right? It's not like when they cut away and then the character is doing a completely different attack, like they're winding up for a kick and then they do a punch, right? At least it's consistent, but still. So the animation then of her kicking there, the windup is pretty decent, but I feel like they kind of cut to the actual kick a little bit too soon. And not to mention, it looks like she's facing the enemy, and then here it kind of looks like she's on the side of an enemy. I don't know, the perspective is a little bit janky there, but the effect looks good. It does kind of look like they just threw a bunch of effects on the screen, but I think it works fine, right? It obviously emphasizes how hard the kick is, and then of course you just have the enemy fly away and smack right into the screen. Now, definitely the final two that are in this video are easily the best animations from this batch, right? Mei Cabra looks really good, I will say. You have him twist his arms, which looks amazing, right? And I love the way that they transition from this kind of far away shot with him twisting his arms, right, to then zooming in on this very nice close-up, right? And the way that they distract you from transitioning the asset is perfect because he covers his face, right? And then his hands go, you know, like kind of parallel to each other. So you don't really notice that the asset changes, right? Because obviously the posing is really good, right? And it's pretty consistent with the zoom. And then obviously having the face kind of be covered makes you not really notice it as much. They did such a good job on this transition, right? Like, you can tell that the asset changes from here to here because that's where his shoulders are, and you can kind of tell by the angle of the armor, but because the zoom is so in line with everything, it makes it look super fluid. Very, very well done. I like the little effect that kind of shoots off of the ki blast as well, or the energy. It looks really, really good, right? And then obviously have a very cool blast in his hand, right? The energy that is forming between his pawed hands, because obviously this is supposed to be like true Demon King Demigra. And then you have, or Demigra, Mei Cabra, sorry. Have I been saying Demigra this whole video? I really hope I haven't been saying Demigra this whole video. Anyway, Mei Cabra, right? So then, you do have this from here, right, where they kind of have a little bit of the zoom out, right, with him holding the blast behind him with a little bit of the purple aura. And you can definitely tell that they kind of put a lot more of their resources into the beginning of this essay until it gets to the very end, right? Like, this part is a lot more simplistic. You know, it is basically just him throwing the ball. Literally, they just twist the PNG a little bit, and then bam, you know, he's kind of already thrown it as it flies away, you know? So, I mean, like, it's not too bad, right? It's just very simple. At least they do kind of a good job of distracting you from, you know, him actually throwing it by just having the blast, like, be in front of him a little bit more prominent. So that's good, at least, I suppose. But yeah, then having it blast away, and of course, you then get to the enemy sprite, where it obviously changes perspective. I do like the lighting, right? Obviously, having that little bit of the outer glow on the blast covering up the unit makes it look like it's actually right in front of the character, which is pretty cool. Again, the blast effect looks really good. And here is where they really cook, right? So they have this very nice shot here, right, of obviously he has his hand out from blasting it, but as they zoom in, right, this is a perfect transition for this because not only does the pose make sense, right, where he's bringing his right hand back and his left hand forward, but also obviously it's supposed to be a quick movement, so it's a perfect place to kind of have that pose change. And I really, really like the effect as well of his hand kind of having that little bit of a blur effect, because ironically enough, they don't even, like, really move it. It's moved when they have that white frame appear, right? Like, right here is when they actually have it kind of zoom in on it, right, to transition it. But it still looks great with a little bit of the anime motion lines to kind of imply that quick movement. They do a good job of distracting you from what's actually happening with the animation, right? So then we have this little effect, right, where obviously the blast hits Trunks here, and of course it has all these crazy electricity effects. It looks really good too, and we then come back to Mei Cabra here, right, obviously in the same pose, with him bringing his fist up, right, with a little bit of energy kind of flaming off of that, which looks really, really cool. I love the movement on the hand here, by the way. Holy cow, can we talk about that? Oh my gosh. That looks so good. Oh my gosh. Super fluid, right? And then obviously a shot from the back with everything exploding, which is cool because obviously, you know, the pose, you know, definitely follows up on where Mei Cabra was in the previous frame, right? Obviously, having his hand kind of be up in a clenched fist, right? Cutting then to the back, right? And it's kind of, I will say, the one thing that I feel like they could maybe have done better with this is it does feel a little bit awkward to have him in the frame and then have the frame pan in like this. I kind of would have rather it went from that nice shot of him with his fist up to like literally right here, right? Because he's already on screen. You don't need to kind of like reintroduce him into the frame. But nonetheless, though, obviously this looks really cool, and I love the transition of the explosion covering the screen, and then they transition his pose to him, you know, laughing maniacally with this crazy explosion on the screen. The effects look insane on this, by the way. They cooked on the way that the effects look on this. But yeah, super cool ending as well. Unfortunately, I don't think this will be a KO screen because it fades to black, but maybe sometimes ones that fade to black do then cut to the animation beforehand, or obviously if they have their own KO screen, which unfortunately Mei Cabra doesn't. But I digress. Still a very nice looking super, right? I think definitely one of the better looking Super Dragon Ball Hero Supers. They have a lot of nice close-ups, a lot of nice fluid animation here, right? They definitely did a very good job on this guy. I remember he was definitely one of the units when he came out. I was the most impressed with his animations, and still to this day, Mei Cabra is definitely one of the units impressing me the most from the Heroes Bunch, and not to mention this bunch specifically too. Alright, so we now move on to God Trunks. So obviously, this is the headliner unit from this year. So of course, this is the unit they are going to end up putting the most into, right? Again, it is cool that they actually have the proper background where they're in the demon realm for this, because of course, this is supposed to be the scene where they defeat, you know, Mei Cabra. So you have this cool part where Trunks is kind of winding up there, right? The background gets darker to kind of emphasize the flame-esque aura of Super Saiyan God, which is really cool. And of course, you have it charge forward. I like the fact that they actually have Trunks' head tilt up a little bit before they transition into the closer-up asset right here. And they do actually have Trunks' hair move quite a bit, which is pretty cool. It definitely looks very nice with this little close-up here. And then, obviously, we then have a flash of light to Trunks kind of coming up from the ground, which makes sense, right? Obviously, you're kind of looking at him, you know, moving forward from above. And then, of course, you have him move up to Mei Cabra to throw a punch here, which I think this is fine. Again, it could definitely have a little bit more animation than neutral flying pose to then the punch being thrown, right? Especially considering he has a little bit before he actually technically makes contact with him. But it's okay. In movement, I think it looks fine, right? You obviously have the little effect kind of pop off. And of course, Trunks gives a little bit of the beatdown here, which looks alright. It's not too crazy, but it's definitely not the worst animation, right? I do like the fact that they have a little bit of follow-up after that punch, right? You can see that his arm kind of moves a little bit, the other one too, before they then transition into, again, another wind-up and a kick, with him then kicking away the enemy. I always thought that that kick felt pretty solid every time that I watched it. I think they did a good job with that kick animation. Okay, so then obviously Trunks' card art appears on the screen, and then of course we get to this part, which is the magnum opus of this animation, where we have the Keyblade form in Trunks' hand. I always thought this animation looked really good, from the sparkles to the sort of like slow-mo-esque way that they kind of have Trunks' hand open up, right, to the actual light pouring over him that's coming from the Keyblade, right, to the Keyblade actually forming in his hand, right, the animation of not only with it actually like appearing, right, they kind of have it glow first, right, to then him actually moving his hand a little bit to kind of like ka-ching, you know, like he's reacting to the recoil, almost like when Captain America, you know, catches his shield type of thing, right? And then Obviously, you have this really cool animation of a little bit of the zoom in of Trunks pointing the sword at the camera, which is awesome. I really, really like that shot a lot. I think it's really cool. And not to mention, it's a great way to transition from that because you're so distracted by the sword. I just realized this part of the sword looks so much like Lucina's sword, the falchion from Fire Emblem. Never noticed that before. Anyhow, though, it's good because obviously it distracts you from the fact that then the sword is already next to Trunks, right? Kind of behind him when they transition from this shot to this shot, right? You don't really notice it because you're so distracted by the sword in your face. And then, of course, the zoom out looks really good with the sparkles coming off of it. And, of course, Trunks looking super nice with the God Aura. Again, the whole time with this, like, animation, the lighting is just so good when obviously the sword appears, because of course the whole thing is that the Keyblade sword is supposed to be glowing. The lighting effects over Trunks are so good. They do a good job of keeping the God Aura and the, you know, light from the sword there for pretty much the whole time, right? I think the only time that it gets a little bit janky maybe is obviously during that one transition frame, right? It's clear that it's supposed to be glowing on his face, but then again, it is sort of like behind him now, so it makes sense why his face doesn't have that glow as much. It is just a little bit jarring though, going from this to this for sure, but I think it still looks very good overall. And then, of course, we have the shot where the aura sort of like goes into Trunks, basically, or like disappears. And you have him fly forward, right? Which I will say, he does come up to the screen quite quickly. However, I think this is fine because it's supposed to be, look how quick he's moving to get to the enemy, right? That's kind of what it feels like more, especially giving this almost like after image, right, effect, which is really cool too. I like these little slashes of energy that they have kind of around him, right? And the glow that they give him as he gets closer and closer to the enemy looks really good. You know, supposed to be like the power, you know, kind of pulsing through him of the funny Keyblade. And again, I love this little bit of like the almost, you know, it kind of reminds you of the Ultra Instinct Goku thing that he does with his arms, where his arms kind of had like that fade effect, right? Obviously supposed to be like slow motion. It looks really, really cool. And the transition from Trunks lifting his sword, right? It's just basically one PNG, but again, it's moving so quickly that I feel like it's not that big of a deal. And then, of course, you have Trunks lift his sword up to then slash through the enemy. And I always like the way that they do this, right? They didn't try and do some crazy shenanigan where they try and have the sprite get split in half or something like this, right? They have Trunks move towards the screen and obviously the sprite kind of move backward, right? And then they have the slice effect appear on the screen. I really like that, with obviously this kind of supposed to be like you're sort of inside Mei Cabra, and obviously the light is kind of pouring through the, you know, now like slash that's inside the body, or cut through the body rather. And then they then transition from that to that. I kind of wish it was a fade from this to this rather than just a cut, but obviously from the back, right, kind of implying that Trunks directly cut through him. This shot always looked really, really cool to me. I like the little slashing effects that are kind of coming off of the blast. And obviously Trunks looks fantastic. It's nice that they even animated his hair like that, right? You can see that there's a little bit of animation on that. There's a little bit of those sparkles coming off of the Keyblade, right? Everything is very well animated here, for sure. It's very simple, right? I think this animation is very simplistic, but it works very, very well. And the little bits of animation in between are done fantastically. Actually, I forgot. There is one more animation that we have to take a look at that's not present in this video. When making this video, I kind of remembered midway through that Trunks actually has a different SSR super attack. I don't know if many people know about it, but in the video I made talking about the case of Gamma 2's missing animations, I brought this up because I was discussing SSR versus TUR animations. So I'm just going to use this from my own video because, you know, why not, right? So this is the SSR Trunks animation. Obviously, keep in mind the background is, you know, the generic background because, of course, it's kind of being pulled from the files in this way, I believe, was what this original footage was from. So we're just going to kind of keep it toned into Trunks here. But it's obviously very, very different from the TUR animation, right? We're going to focus on the SSR. You have this very nice shot of Trunks, excuse me, stanced up here in the beginning. Again, it's nice to see that they bothered to animate his hair moving a little bit, even if it's nothing crazy. But You have a little bit of a zoom out before Trunks kind of kneels down a little bit, which looks really, really good, right? Obviously, with him kind of getting ready to draw his actual sword. It's kind of funny. He, you know, like, basically doesn't really use his regular sword in the actual animation, but in the SSR animation, he does, right? So he squats down for the beginning of that, and then you basically have him kind of come in from the top ropes here, right, and sort of fly in and slash the enemy. Let me actually slow that down. No wonder it was feeling like it was a little bit weird for trying to take a look at it. With that little lean down, it's kind of funny that that part right there is basically the entirety of the beginning of the animation. But it's nice, right? It's a good little setup to then obviously what follows, which is, of course, Trunks jumping down from the sky, right? It's nice whenever the beginning of an essay sets up the second half like this, and it's not just a cut that kind of leads into something completely different, right? You have Trunks come down, right? The aura looks good. And then, of course, when he finally gets to the enemy, the kind of way that they handle it is, again, instead of sort of slashing the enemy, they have this little blue effect appear on the screen, which is pretty cool. And then, of course, the white flash with the little blue energy kind of coming off of it, and that little blue slash once again on the stream, which I think this is a pretty cool transition, going from, let me see if I can actually get it back up there, just the blue slash, right, because obviously that's like kind of the final thing after the whole slash animation completes, to then your eyes are focused on the slash, and once it finally goes to the enemy, right, you can see that the slash is on the enemy. That's a cool little bit of perspective, and obviously with the enemy behind Trunks, right, the super cool animation of the electricity, and Trunks sheathing his sword, right, which is awesome too, because he does the funny thing, you know, where as soon as he sheathes the sword, right, then the actual attack goes off, right? Which looks great. I like that he also kind of moves his eyes a little bit too, and the explosion effect in the background looks nice as well. But yeah, I at least just wanted to include this in the video, even though it's not an incredibly long animation, just because I'm sure most people don't know about it. And of course, when I'm doing these animation videos, if any of these units have a SSR animation, I try and include it if I can remember that it's there. Or obviously, you know, not every Dokkan unit does. And if any of these do, and I forgot about it, I do apologize. I'll have to maybe include it in the next SDBH video or something like that. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed. Definitely let me know what you think of these super attack animations in the comment section below. Again, even though they were from 2021, I still definitely think at the time they could have been better. And we have seen them perpetually get better over the years, right? Obviously, Hearts' was, you know, one of, if not the best SDBH animation that we've ever seen. So I think they are definitely improving these animations a lot more. They're giving them a lot more love. They're giving them a lot more heart, which is very, very nice, right? And I'm hoping that this year, especially with the characters that we are getting, they are going to be sick. But thank you guys so much for watching. Again, don't forget to like and subscribe if you did enjoy. And with all that being said, don't forget to join the Discord, link in the description. I recently revamped it, so we're having a good time over there, having some different discussions. And I will catch you in the next one. Dokkan Assets out. Peace.